Hey everybody, it's Ryan from Pi Records, and I'm here with Clint Beachwood of San Diego University, KCR Radio, the college radio station. He has a great show on there. It's 4 hours long, in the morning on Saturdays, and he also has a great podcast. Clint, welcome to Pi Records.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Tell me a little bit about how you got into music, wanting to be a DJ. What inspired you?
Well, I guess it all goes back to my youth. I'm not quite old enough to be around, to be old enough in the early 60s to be able to go see the bands. I was born in 1954, so surf music lasted from basically 61 to 64, 65. And so I was still pretty young, but I still remember listening to the radio. I remember going to a friend's house who had older brothers who were very much into the surf music scene. This was growing up in Downey, California, okay, which is a suburb of Los Angeles. And I just associate beach music, surf music, that whole AM radio scene back in the early 60s with having just great memories of hanging out with my friends and goofing off and spending the night and things like that. And so I associate that music with a really fun time in my life. So that's really how it all got started.
So did you go to college at San Diego, or how did you wind up there?
Let me fast forward a little bit from my youth to it was sometime in the 90s, mid 90s. I had not yet seen Pulp Fiction, so I cannot attribute the music in Pulp Fiction to this love of surf music that I had. But I still, I happened to come across the band, a live show at the San Diego County Fair. Surf Report was the name of the band, and they enlightened me to the fact that surf music still exists. Here it is in the 90s, and there are actually bands playing surf music, which I had no idea. And so at that point, I really started looking into the surf music scene. I'd go to used CD stores, used record stores, look for basically old surf music because I really didn't have any. I was a Beach Boy fan. I've always been a Beach Boy fan, but as far as surf music goes, I didn't have anything. So I started looking and I started finding the Challengers, the Bel Air, Dick Dale, all these standards, and then some obscure things. I remember coming across the Ghastly One CD, and
oh yeah,
and then I found out that there are just a ton of modern surf bands to go along with all this old stuff from the 60s. So I was just in heaven, and I think the band that really sealed it for me was the Aqua Velvets. I found Nomad, and I listened to it, and every song I just fell in love with it, and so. At that point, I really started collecting more and more surf music, both old stuff and new stuff. Well, back in the 80s, I'm taking on a little time travel thing here. Back in the 80s, I came across KCR Radio, and a guy by the name of Joe Schrin, who still has a show on before mine. He's on from 6 a.m. till 10. And he played oldies, and it's commercial free. And so he really turned me on to KCR Radio. And after I listened to him for probably about 10 years, my career path was such that I started going back to school to advance my career. It took me to San Diego State. I looked into the radio station just to see where he did his show. I would go in on Saturday mornings sometimes just to watch him do a show because I developed a friendship with him just by making phone calls to the station and making requests and talking music. And so, yeah, I went to San Diego State. I got my bachelor's degree in business from San Diego State. And all this time I was friends with Joe and familiar with KCR, and I was collecting a large volume of surf music that I just enjoyed myself. And I noticed at KCR that it was not well staffed. About half the time slots were not taken. And so I asked Joe what it would take to get a show there, being an alumni, which he was, and I was also. So we talked to the general manager at the station. We went through a few hoops, and bottom line, I ended up getting a show of my own. My first show was in November of 2001, 20
Wow.
years ago.
Yeah.
So, and I've been there ever since doing the KCR. It's changed formats a little bit. It initially was 2 hours. I've expanded it to 4 hours. And so that kind of brings you up to date as far as KCR goes.
Yeah, yeah. I noticed that in that 4 hour block, you have different a different format for each hour, or different genre.
Correct.
You wanna kind of tell us about that?
Right. I have always had a love of instrumental music, and I'm not sure what it is about instrumental music in general that I just love over vocals. I mean, not that I hate vocals. I love them, I mean, the Beatles I've been watching this Beatle thing on TV, and it's been great,
Yeah, it's great.
But I have always just been drawn to instrumental music, whether it's Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, or Booker T, or the Allman Brothers put out some great instrumentals. And so I decided, when I went to 4 hours, I decided to put aside 1 hour for my love of instrumental music. And so that's what the first hour is. And it's all sorts of things, anything from, Buck Owens playing Buckaroo, which is an instrumental, to Emerson, Lake and Palmer doing Hoedown, So I am all over the map on my first hour, but it's all instrumentals. I don't play too much jazz. I don't play too much classical. But other than that, I play a lot of progressive rock, like Alan Parsons Project, Herb Alpert, like I said, rock and roll, Edgar Winter Group and Frankenstein, for example. And so the first hour is all instrumental of all genres. The second hour is all old surf music, 60s, or bands that really sound like they're from the 60s, because there's a lot of modern bands who really try to emulate that early 60s sound.
Yeah.
Both in their original songs and the gear they use and everything about them, the way they dress sometimes. Anyway, so the second hour is dedicated to early 60s traditional surf music. And then the third hour, is all modern surf music, modern bands, basically from the 80s forward. And currently, what I'm doing is I'm going through my entire collection, like back there, of all my surf music. I mean, because normally with the podcast I do, I reserve that for modern releases. But after I play a new CD, a new album, maybe 2 or 3, 4 songs off of that, I'll just put it up on the shelf, and there it will sit for who knows how long. And so, because there's constantly new music being released, I cannot keep up with the amount of new releases in the world of surf music. I just can't. So a lot of this stuff just doesn't get played ever. And so what I've been doing for the past couple of years is just playing one song off of each album I have by these modern surf bands. And I'm currently in the M's right now. So the Madeira, the Messer Chops. Yeah, exactly. Bands like that. And it's kind of been fun to pull these CDs that I haven't listened to in years sometimes, and go through them and pick out a song that I really like off of each CD. That's the third hour. And the fourth hour, I'm just playing vocal songs. songs that I have really enjoyed over the years, and that's again all over the map. Mostly rock and roll, but I was kind of into new wave for a while. I liked southern rock for a while. After about the 80s, 90s, I really stopped listening to commercial radio. So my music tastes are all, from the 60s to the 80s, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Very
that's the
cool.
format of KCR.
So I think it's important that people know that they can listen to your show not just in San Diego, correct?
Oh no, it's over the internet, so it's worldwide.
So
As long as you can get the internet, you can get KCR.
So tell me what the web address is for that for our listeners.
KCRlive.com.
Awesome.
Is the website for the college radio station. There's a play button. You just scroll down a little bit, you'll find the play button. You just hit it, and it should start streaming. We've been promoting the app Radio FX. The Radio FX app for your mobile device is geared for college radio stations.
Oh, awesome.
And but you can only get that on your phone, on your tablet, but you can't put it on your laptop. So the laptop, you go to, your desktop, desktop, you go to KCRlive.com. For your mobile device, we recommend downloading the free Radio FX app and then finding KCR. Make it a favorite,
perfect.
And you can pull us up anytime. It's real easy.
And once your show airs on Saturday, is that kind of archived where people can go in and listen to it afterwards?
Unfortunately, no, it's not. It's live and that's it. We don't archive our shows. So
okay,
if you don't listen to it between 10 and 2 San Diego time,
at specific time,
what you could do, now exactly it is. Because of the pandemic, we've been recording from home. We haven't been going back into the studio on campus. So I've been recording all these shows from home, and I have all those shows available on my hard drive. If anyone really wants to hear a show, they can just email me and I can send it to them. They can listen that way.
Let's give us your email address in case somebody wants to write that down.
Yeah, Clint Beachwood at Gmail.
Awesome. Hopefully we can get you a couple of emails. People can hear some.
Yeah, I'd love to. I would love to share it with whoever wants to listen to it.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your podcast. You said you do it once a month. What is the basis for that? What gave you the idea to do a podcast?
Well, KCR has been around since 1969. And when internet streaming became a reality, we jumped on that bandwagon and we started streaming as soon as we could. Well, record label started having an issue with internet streaming. This is probably 10, 15 years ago now. And there were a lot of legal concerns about streaming music over the internet without paying certain royalties or copyright fees. And the avenues were not set up to make that real easy. And the systems that were in place required that you pay an exorbitant amount of money in order to have the right to stream your station over the internet.
Oh, wow.
Regardless if you have 10 listeners or if you have 10,000 listeners.
The flat fee.
And so it was a flat fee. And if you didn't pay it and decided to go stream your music anyway, you could be fined by the FAA or whoever it was controlling that.
Right.
And so as a result of that, KCR just shut down until they were able to figure out what was happening with the laws and regulations at the time. So when KCR stopped streaming, my audience just plummeted because everybody was listening online. We do broadcast locally over cable TV systems and a very weak AM signal. but most of my listeners were online. So at that point, I got together with a friend of mine here in town by the name of Rick Wilkinson, and he has a website where he promotes his ribbon microphones. He's a do-it-yourself electronic computer nerd, so to speak, and he has put together these build your own ribbon microphone kits, and he has a website. Wow. And that's a really big website. And and we got together and he says, why don't you use my website? You can do a podcast. I will upload that for you and you can use it, And so as a result of him, I was able to really record a podcast from home. It's an hour long, commercial free. I upload it to his website. And so that's how it's available. And so I started doing that in 2010.
Wow, that's you must have gained quite an audience with that.
It's been doing pretty well. Even though I'm not positive how many people are actually listening to the whole show, but we know we get a certain amount of clicks on the show.
Yeah,
and it's been doing well. It's been doing very well.
So what are some of the topics you cover on the podcast?
The podcast is surf music. It's all modern releases of modern surf bands around the world. I'm just finishing up podcast 193. I'll probably have it out tomorrow. And it includes bands from the UK, from Russia, from Mexico, the Netherlands, as well as the United States. And most of the time, bands will send me their music to play. Sometimes I'll search them out if it's something that I really like and I don't have. But as a result, almost everything I like to play on the podcast is new music.
Oh, good.
Current releases within the last year, but hopefully sooner than that. But that is really the format of the podcast.
What do you like to chat about on the podcast? Do you do some like news, like what band's doing what's going on in what country kind of thing?
I mentioned I don't do a lot of talking on the podcast. I announce the songs. I announce the bands. Usually they're the name of the LP that it comes off of. I encourage people, if they like it, to go search out the band and buy their music. My goal for all of this that I do is to promote surf music and to encourage people to go to the band and buy the music from them, to show their support for the band and all the hard work they put into writing the music, performing it, recording it, and all the other hassles and expenses that come along with sharing this awesome music with us, the listener, and all we have to do is turn on the internet and listen to it. So that's really my goal.
It's really crazy. Like you said before, there's just a ton of bands. Like when I do these interviews, I had no idea how long it would last, but I just keep finding new bands.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
And they're all great.
It's just amazing. Yeah, I know. And they're all over the world.
Yeah.
It has been so cool to be a part of this surf music scene, this genre, that I feel so honored to be a part of be in there somewhere, because everybody is so nice, and because nobody's making a living off of this music except for maybe low straitjackets.
Yeah.
That's and now the surfragettes, they're doing quite well too.
Oh yeah.
Of course, they're pretty cute. They're short little skirts and boots, But all these other bands have day jobs, and it's just a hobby, and they put so much time and energy into these bands that I feel real fortunate to be a part of this whole music scene.
That's awesome.
No egos, no lead singers, no egos in surf music. I have seen very few egos, and that's another thing I really enjoy about it.
I agree. One less component.
Yeah, exactly.
So being in San Diego, do you ever have any certain guests come in, maybe the tour leaders?
I have interviewed a few people on the podcast. Let's go back to KCR. KCR has been in a couple different locations, the actual studio on campus. When I first started there, we had a great studio. It was big enough to house a band, and I would have a lot of bands go into that studio and play live.
Like back in the
if
day.
a band was gonna, like back in the day, and if a band was coming to California from anywhere around the world, I would try to get them to come to KCR and play live, because it was usually during the day. It would fit into their schedule, especially if they're playing San Diego, in the evening. I tried to get them to KCR during the day, and I had bands, the Wise from Japan, the Razor Blades from Germany, all sorts of different bands would come in and play. It was great. Well, KCR had to move because they demolished that building and built a new one, and they moved us into a dinky little studio that is barely room for a DJ and a guest, let alone a band. So the days of a band performing at KCR just is not going to happen, unfortunately. As far as the podcast I record from home. I would love to have bands come into my garage and play live in the garage, and I could record them, and I should probably start doing that. I did have Davey Allen play live in the garage, because he was going to play somewhere in San Diego, and he was playing for the first time with Dutzy Watson on drums and Sam Bole on bass, and they had never played together before. So they asked me if they could use my garage, and I go, yeah, I guess you can,
Twist
if
my
you
arm.
have to. Exactly. And so that was awesome. And I don't know why I don't do that. I should probably explore that option, is to have bands play live and record them and put it out on the podcast. The only other thing I've done on the podcast that has been out of the ordinary is I've done a couple of interviews that I have put out on the podcast. One was Jimmy Gallagher, who was the drummer for the Astronauts, who just recently passed away. But he was a great interview. He told the whole story of the beginning of the Astronauts and how they were discovered in Colorado as a frat band. And a couple of them went to LA to RCA Records, to see if they could land a record deal. And the guy was on the phone with somebody in the office where they went, and they were talking. The RCA guys were having problems with the Beach Boys over at Capitol being so successful. And the guy on the phone asked the Astronauts, "Do you play that surf music stuff?" And they say, "Yeah, we do." And even though they really didn't at the time, but so they were signed by RCA. And anyway, Jimmy told a great story, and it's one of the podcasts that's still up. All the podcasts are still available if anybody wants to listen to them. And then the other interview I did was of Jim Messina, Messina, and he was in Buffalo, Springfield, and Poco. Well, he started off as in a surf band when he was in high school. And so I was able to talk to Jim Messina for about half hour, 45 minutes about his high school days and what it was like being a kid in Southern California. He loved Dick Dale, and he kind of took his style after Dick Dale. And that was a fun interview also.
That's amazing. And when you interview your heroes or musicians in general, you just I get such great pleasure just talking about music, and it must be the same for you.
Certainly, especially when you find out things that you didn't know before.
Yeah.
Like the whole Astronauts background and how they got their start. I wasn't familiar with that. I have since learned that whole story is out there, but I didn't know it at the time. And so it was just really enlightening. And then to have Jim Messina, and we got one other guy from his band from high school. His name was Ron House. And the two of them got together and were reminiscing. And it was fun to kind of just sit back and listen to those two guys talk and reminisce about being in high school and some of the gigs they did and places they played. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Now, what is the website people can find your podcast on, and can they also stream it on any of the apps?
No, I haven't gone there. I am on SoundCloud now, and I just started putting the podcast up on SoundCloud. But I've been a little hesitant again because of the royalties issue, and
Yeah.
when I first started doing the podcast, I looked into that, and from what I could gather, podcasters or anyone who puts music out over the internet are supposed to pay some kind of royalty fee to somebody.
Yeah.
And I certainly don't have the money for that. And so I would get away from that just by asking the bands if I could play their music. I would get their permission to play, without any compensation in terms of royalties. The only compensation they would get is exposure, and hopefully people would buy their CDs, and vinyl. And so I've always been a little leery of that copyright problem, and especially since it's on Rick Wilkinson's website.
You don't want to
that
get
kind
him
of brings
in trouble.
him into the picture. Exactly. So, the easiest way, the website is, I think it's DIY, doityourselfmicrophone.com/a-day-at-the-beach.
Okay.
It's kind of a long, drawn out website. The easiest thing to do is just Google A Day at the Beach podcast.
Oh, great.
And if you do that, I'm usually always the first listing up there. So Google A Day at the Beach podcast, and you should be able to find me.
Awesome. Lots of great info.
Okay.
What is since COVID came around, I'm sure you had a lot of time to think about what you were going to do. I'm sure there was a lot more podcasting in your house going on. What's up with you these days?
Well, first of all, I'm retired from work, which is great. I retired a couple of years ago, so that has freed me up. And as far as the virus goes, I haven't been too restricted. The biggest problem with this pandemic is the lack of live shows that I love to go see. But as far as getting new music from bands, that has slowed down some because a lot of them just haven't been able to go into a studio or whatever, or get together. And so I think that is behind us because the new music is really starting to come back now.
Yeah. There's tons of stuff. I can't believe it.
Yeah, there really is. I think there's a guy who puts out a list of all the new releases every year. I think it's I forget the name of the guy. He's on Surf Guitar 101 and which is the forum, and he keeps track of all the new releases, and it's just an amazing list to go by because he keeps track of full albums, EPs, and singles, and the list is humongous. It's just amazing. I would love to spend more time with this, but it is a hobby for me. I don't get any money at all for it. My only payment is in form of the new music that I get, that bands send me.
Yeah.
But it is a hobby, and it's nice just to be able to share it with everybody. And that's really what some of the enjoyment I get out of doing all this is just being able to share this new music.
And the interaction I'm sure you get from the listeners as well.
Oh, true. Yeah. I got an email from a guy who has cancer. This was about 6 months ago. He has pancreatic cancer, and he just kind of went off a little bit on how much joy and happiness he gets out of listening to my podcast.
Oh, that's great.
And let me tell you, that was the best email I think I have ever gotten. I mean, it brought so much happiness, and that I could actually be having such an impact on somebody's life just for doing something that I love to do, you know, that I it was really a cool email. Other than that, I get a lot of comments about, you know, they really enjoyed the show. They appreciate the time and effort I put into the show. But that one email that really brought out the fact that this guy loves the music and loves the podcast so much, even and considering the amount of suffering he's going through, it really is a bright spot in his day. So it made me feel really good.
Yeah, that's amazing, especially that he took the time while he was, you know, probably, you know, not in such a good way. He took the time to let you know that you made a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
So
yeah.
So before we sign off, I want to have a reminder: 10 to 2 on Saturday mornings Pacific time, KCR Radio.
Right, KCRlive.com.
And your podcast can be located on.
It's on Austin Ribbon Microphone's website.
Okay.
But again, the best way to find the podcast is just to Google "A Day at the Beach" podcast. Okay. I also have a Facebook page. I have a Facebook page for both shows. So it's Facebook/Clint Beachwood Show for the radio show. For the podcast, it's Facebook/Beach Podcast. And awesome. There I list the playlist. I list every song that I play and the band and the album that the music comes from. On the podcast, I also list the website where they can go and purchase music if they want to.
Now, on the KCR part of it, do you play every form of media, like vinyl, CD, digital?
I don't play vinyl too much just because my setup here at home is not real conducive to a smooth flow. But I do have lots of vinyl. I have some vinyl. And the turntable's right here, and I do play it from time to time. But it's so much easier to just throw in CDs in the CD player and play the show that way. I try to do the show and when I go into the studio on campus, it's live and you have to play it regardless of your mistakes and CD players that malfunction and the whole bit, you know?
Yeah.
And I try to duplicate that same feel when I do it at home, even though at home I can stop and go edit it a little bit if I need to or correct mistakes. But I really tried just to run through it as if I was in the studio on the campus of San Diego State University.
Cool.
The podcast, on the other hand, because all 192 podcasts are available to listen to. You can go back and listen to all of them if you want to. And so as a result, the fact that they are archived and they're something that's constantly out there available to the public, I do put more effort into making it a cleaner show, to eliminating my mistakes, my ums and ahs, you know, and things like that. And so I do that with the podcast, but not the radio show. And I think that's pretty obvious to the listener if they listen to both the podcast and the radio show. The radio show, the 4-hour radio show is pretty sloppy, and the 1-hour podcast is pretty clean.
Let me ask you this though. I work in live TV, and I've also worked in live radio. Doesn't that give you a rush, like the live feel?
Yes, I miss going into the studio on campus. I really enjoy that. That exactly what you said. It's live. It's going out there right now, and you do your best to put out a good show and to make it as mistake-free as possible.
Yeah.
But mistakes are going to happen, and you just do your best to work around them and put out the best show possible.
Definitely. I always get a rush from the live production. It's in the moment and anything can happen and things change at the last second. I love that about being live. Yeah.
And it makes you a little nervous, and performing in front of an audience, even though that's not a live audience that you can see, but they're out there listening. So
Yeah.
it is. I agree completely what you say.
Do you get any when you said you had calls come in, did they give you requests and things like that, or feedback, or just to talk?
When I was in the studio at San Diego State and people would call the studio, not too many would make requests. I'd get a few of those, but mostly people just wanted to talk, to say hi, how you doing, enjoy your show, what's going on, just shoot the breeze. And so that was cool too.
Well, that's a good way to connect people right there. You're making a direct connection with people when you're on the phone, and they're going to say, hey, that guy that does this show in KCR is a really cool guy. You got to listen to him, and he's really cool. You should all even talk to him.
Yeah. And I did the same exact thing with my friend Joe, who has a show on before me. And I developed that friendship with him, and that just led into me getting a show at the studio. So it's weird. It's funny how things happen and work out, but that's how it worked out for me. And I always, when I say how thankful I am to have a show at KCR and now the podcast, it all goes back to Joe Schrin for being a friend and supporting me to get my own show there with alongside of him. So it's been great.
Awesome. Is there anything that you thought about maybe mentioning or that you wanted to talk about before we sign off that I may not have touched on?
Boy, I don't think so. The one thing maybe that we didn't hit on, and we kind of did, but one of the best things about, again, being involved with this music, surf music in general, is it's such a tight-knit family of bands and fans that you really draw a closeness to those people, both the bands and the people who go see the shows. A lot of times it's the same people over and over again, but as a result, you become really good friends and you develop good friendships with these people. And I've made a lot of good friends over the years, which I am very thankful for. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been great getting to know some of these people. And the musicians are just incredible, how good they are. It is just amazing to see what talent they have, and how it's sad to see how unappreciated they are and how underrated their music is, because surf music just doesn't get to the general population, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
And these guys are such great musicians. It's just amazing. So
they have to go out. I mean, I've seen how the bands help each other. They kind of spread the word about each other, and you got DJ Dottie, yourself, you have Shaky Cats Radio in Canada doing their part, but I see the bands themselves helping each other out, not only doing splits and things like that, but cross promoting.
Right.
And it's really cool to see that it's not a competition between these guys.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I agree.
So I want to thank you so much, Clint, for being on the show. I gotta admit, I was kind of like, am I in over my head? Because this guy probably has such a history. Anybody in radio, I feel, has got to know a little bit about what they're talking about, or they wouldn't last.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I appreciate your time so much, and I really enjoyed hearing about your story, and I wish you great luck at the studio and on your podcast.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, Ryan, getting to see you and get to talk to you a little bit and get to meet you. Appreciate it.
You too. Have a great night.
Okay. Merry Christmas to you too.
Merry Christmas, sir. Merry Christmas.